Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 8th Wall live learning session. This is our bi-weekly webinar series where we invite our developer community to come join us for an interactive session of tips and tricks related to web AR development. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. In these sessions, we talk about what's new at 8th Wall. Then we dive into a relevant topic or demo. And finally, we open things up at the end for live Q&A. If you have any questions, please use the Zoom Q&A window to ask your questions. The session is being recorded. It will be posted on YouTube and also emailed to everyone who registered. So before we begin, just some quick introductions. If we haven't met before, my name is Tony Tamarchio. I'm the Director of Technical Operations here at 8th Wall. And once again, I'm joined by Rigel Benton. Rigel is our lead product designer. So most of you have probably seen us on our developer Slack channel. It's a great place to be if you haven't signed up already. You can do so at 8thwall.com/Slack. There are over 3,500 members. It's a great place to ask questions, to interact with other 8th Wall developers, to share what you've created, things like that, and stay up to date with what's going on with 8th Wall. So between Rigel and myself, we've worked with lots and lots of web AR developers. Really, the goal of these live learning sessions here is to pass along some of the things that we've learned in working with all of you to help make your life a little bit easier here. So if you have any feedback, feature requests, issues, questions, please reach out to us at any time. So today's topic is something that's been coming up a lot, especially in our developer Slack, and that it has to do with splash screens, loading screens, and also the browser permission prompts. So that's the main topic. We'll jump into that in a little bit, but before we start, I'm going to turn things over to Rigel, and Rigel's going to start by talking about some recent updates from the team. Once he's done that, I'll dive into the main topic for the day. So Rigel, take it away.
Cool, thanks. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. So I have a few new updates actually. So the first one has to do with iOS 14.6, which recently came out a few days ago. What's really great about this release in iOS is that it finally fixed the bug regarding HLS streaming on iOS 12 devices in WebGL. And what that basically means is there were a few sample projects that used live streaming, such as the 360 live stream portal that previously, that wasn't working on iOS 12 devices. It's now fixed, as well as live streaming, or sorry, HLS streaming of HCAP is now fully functional on those devices as well. So for holograms and stuff, you don't have to wait for it to load. So that's really exciting. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was the 8th Wall Playground has a few new projects. So if you go to 8thwall.com/playground, that's an easy way to find it. Also, there's links throughout the docs and the tutorials page, but it's a really great collection of projects that help you do and learn how to do really specific things. And so the first one I want to talk about is the A-frame 3D model configurator. And this is really awesome. There's a great write-up in here about how to set up your model to be able to change its material properties at runtime using this nice UI here where you can change the color, change the model around. And then the next one, this is actually a project that came out of the last live learning where you could previously, of course, throw your HCAP in a scene, but it was by default using a basic material. And so this project, the Hologram Relight project, shows you how to change the material to react to light, to make it physically based. And so here's a cool thing where you have these like swirling, glowing orbs, and you can like change their color as a hologram plays back. And then the latest here, the last one I want to mention is the custom fonts project has been updated to allow for, and the cloud editor has been updated to allow for font type support. So, previously there was a little bit of an annoyance. You had to create an asset bundle to upload font types. So those are all now supported. So you can just drag your custom fonts in, and then you can go through here and it'll show you how to reference those so that the custom fonts load correctly. So go check out the playground and all those new fun projects. And with that, I will hand it back over to Tony.
Awesome. Thanks, Rigel. Let me share my screen again and we'll continue. Awesome. Okay, so the topic for today is all about browser permission prompts and customizing the load screen. So there's been some confusion about what's splash screen versus loading screen. Why are these prompts being put in front of the end users that are trying to view the web air experiences? Which ones can I customize versus which ones are coming from the browser itself, and therefore you couldn't customize it. So we're going to talk about what these different things are, what you can, what you can't customize, and then I'll bring up a demo and we'll go ahead and we'll take a sample project and we'll make some modifications to customize the loading screen via some parameters that we provide using some JavaScript techniques, overriding CSS, using mutation observers to rewrite text and things like that. And then also just some information about, well, if you want to create your own completely custom loading screen from scratch, we'll talk about how that could be done briefly with XRExtras and all the source code that's available online for you to access. And then finally, I'm going to talk briefly about a technique that people have asked about recently, where you don't request any of the browser permissions immediately, and you don't start AR immediately. Maybe you want to have an info screen or something with a start AR button. So I'll show you a technique to do that as well. So let's jump in. So the first thing that you'll see is if you go to the project library or the playground that Rigel mentioned, and you try any of these live demos, or you're accessing any of the eighth wall projects that you built in the cloud editor, or you're developing, you scan the preview QR code to get at your development build, you see this first screen, and it kind of takes over the entire screen, and the Powered by Eighth logo and the Powered by Eighth wall fades in and it fades out over a second or two. This is what we call the default splash screen. So the default splash screen is included with your project when you are using the cloud editor only. So if you happen to be self-hosting or building outside the cloud editor, the default splash screen isn't part of the project. This splash screen cannot be customized, with the exception of the badge at the bottom right. I'm sorry, it's a typo. It's not lower left, it's lower right, but it reflects the project type. So it might say demo use or educational or non-commercial. And that's the only thing you can change on the splash screen here currently. However, for commercial projects, you can completely disable this default splash screen. And I'll show you how that's done in the demo, but basically it's done via the project's settings page. Under basic information, there's a toggle where you can enable or disable the default splash screen. So again, default splash screen is an on or off thing. It can be turned off with commercial projects, but other than that, it's not something you can modify. So after the splash screen fades in and fades out, the next screen is the loading screen. And the loading screen is where AR is initializing, your scene is initializing, and you want to have some type of a screen that's displayed. You wouldn't want your 3D model to start to appear on the screen behind the browser prompts before the camera feed was able to initialize and things like that. So on top of the loading screen, this is where you generally see all of the browser permission prompts. Now, depending on the device that you're on, and depending on the type of experience that you're building and OS version and things like that, you might see different prompts. So the first one that I want to highlight here is this is the motion sensor, pre-prompt almost, if you will. This is something that's specific to iOS, and specifically it's iOS 13 and newer. And this prompt is only displayed if you're dealing with a world tracking or a SLAM-based experience, because the device is going to need access to the gyros. And the way that iOS works is the gyro request is separate from the camera request unlike Chrome on Android. So This prompt is actually coming directly from the 8th wall AR engine. And the reason why it's there is in order to actually request the motion and orientation sensors from the browser, Apple has decided that you first need to capture a user gesture. So our engine is smart enough to know, well, if the user you haven't captured a user gesture yet on the page, we don't want you to have a broken experience. So that's why we post this prompt. Basically, the sole purpose of this is to get you to click continue to get the user to tap on the screen so that the actual browser permission prompt can be displayed. This can be customized as well. We'll talk about this in the demo, but you can override some of the CSS classes if you want to change the colors. And you can also use a mutation observer, and I'll demo that as well if you want to change the text. So now, also in the demo, we'll talk about having like your own kind of Start AR button that captures that gesture. This screen will only be displayed, like, again, if you're starting AR directly, you haven't captured a user gesture. If you have, this just gets bypassed. So that's what's happening here with this first screen. Now, assuming the user clicks continue and basically you've got them to tap on the screen, the next prompt is the actual browser requests for the motion and orientation sensor, or the gyro. So again, this is also an iOS 13 and higher thing. This permission prompt is coming directly from the browser. So this isn't something you can customize. It basically has the allow button, the cancel button, and at the top of the message, it displays the URL, the domain portion of the URL, and you can't change that text, at least not that I'm aware of. Again, this is another prompt that only comes into play if you are working with a world tracking, aka a SLAM-based experience. If this is image target only, and perhaps you set disable world tracking to true, or if this is a face effects experience, then the gyro wouldn't be needed, and prompt number 1 and this prompt number 2, just would not be relevant. And finally, you've got the camera permission prompt. So again, you're going to have a camera permission prompt on all devices. Chrome on Android likes to remember this across reloads. iOS Safari by default, it will ask you every time. And the user can save this on a per domain basis, but there's no API to set it. So on iOS, you're going to basically see a camera permission prompt on every page load here. This is another one that is coming directly from the browser, and you can't customize this. Okay, so that's kind of the high level. Then those prompts were really just kind of covering up the loading screen. Again, the point of the loading screen is to put something meaningful in front of the user while you're waiting for them to approve the browser permissions, and B, to be displayed in front of the AR scene while things like your assets are loading. Once that's done, this fades away. The loading screen, this is actually coming from our XRExtras library. XRExtras, all of the source code is available on our GitHub repo. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. It is fully customizable. You can grab the source code to XRExtras, you can modify it, you can create your own custom version of that if you really want. But oftentimes there are a lot easier ways to customize it. We provide some parameters, and we highlight, we can target some IDs and CSS classes if you just want to override certain things. And that's nice because then you can still pull our library from CDN. So you always get our latest and greatest updates to XRExtras, but then you can just override certain bits and pieces that you want to do. Now at the bottom of this loading screen, you'll see that there is a very small powered by 8th wall logo. So this is a question that we get asked, probably almost daily is, can I remove the powered by 8th wall logo? So the short answer is no. The powered by 8th wall logo is required on all 8th wall experiences. It's very small. You can customize this screen so it matches the look and feel of your company or the brand that you're building an experience for. And this screen is only there for a few moments, basically while you're waiting for the user to grant camera permissions. Then it fades away and you're in your AR experience. Now, so just to recap, the splash screen can be disabled. The loading screen must keep the powered by 8th wall logo. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of kind of the initial flow and the screens that you typically see when you are pulling up an 8th wall web AR experience. And with that, let me switch gears here and we'll bring up the cloud editor. I'll bring up a live demo and we can see what it looks like to customize some of these things. So here we go. Okay, so I have a sample project here. And before I make any changes, let's just go ahead and verify that like what we've just been talking about on the slides here is what we see. So I'm going to scan the preview QR code and scan this with my device. And let's pull this up. So again, I have the splash screen, it's fading in, it's fading out. Now I've got the first prompt. So this project is a clone of our sandcastle project, or also known as the manipulate project, where we have a sandcastle and it has touch gestures and I can interact with the 3D model. So this is a world tracking or a SLAM-based experience. And that's why it's asking me to basically pre-approve the request for the sensor permission. So I'm gonna click continue. And as expected, it pulled up the actual browser prompt to request the gyro. And this wouldn't have been possible if I didn't yet tap on the screen before that point. So again, that's why we inject that. And I'm going to click allow. And now it's asking me for camera permission prompt. So again, this is not something I can customize. I can click allow. You'll notice that behind it, in between the different permission prompts, you saw that there was a circle, like a loading kind of icon that was spinning. Again, that's one of the things you can customize, but basically these prompts are sitting on top of this is what we call our loading module or loading screen within XRExtras. Okay, so we're gonna click allow. And now we've got our web AR experience and I can interact with the 3D model and everything is working as expected. So, okay, so that first prompt or that first screen that we saw again was the splash screen. So to enable or disable the splash screen, first of all, you would go to the project dashboard. And right now this is a demo project, but if you have a commercial project, you would change the license type. You would set the type to commercial, and then you would go into the settings page. Now here in the settings page, there's basic information settings here. And if I scroll down, this is where you would disable the default splash screen. So this is gonna tell me I can't do it because it's a demo project. Right, so it needs to be commercial first, but okay, but it's pretty simple. Disable the radio button, click save, it will republish your project and it will not have the splash screen there. So that's how you disable the default splash screen. Okay, so now there are different ways we can customize the load screen. And there's kind of like, there's a handful of like really easy settings, all the way through like more custom and complex involved things using mutation observers and so on. So let's start with some of the easy parameters here. So let me just switch tabs for a moment. And we have a lot of information in our documentation about customizing the load screen. So here, if you just want to make a couple of quick changes, like swap out a logo, or maybe make the logo in the middle, change the animation style from spin to pulse or something. You want to change out the icon at the top or any of the background colors, that's really easy to do. And we actually provide you some parameters where you can specify, like the requesting camera permission is the icon, the color up top, the camera icon, the load background, the load image, or also, this first prompt, again, that was iOS only and SLAM only, you can customize like the colors. And we list the IDs and the CSS classes that you can target here. So let's do this right now. So we have this XRExtras loading component, and I'm going to modify this. And actually, I'm just going to do a copy and paste here to save a little bit of time. So here I've got this XRExtras loading, and let's put this here into my project. And there we go, pasting it in. So now I'm changing the load background color as well as the camera background color. So that's both the top box and the bottom box. And I want to have a custom image. So I actually took a logo. So instead of that spinning that little circle icon, I want to put the 8th wall logo there instead. You could put your own logo in that place. And I have to add the asset to my project. So I'm going to go ahead and say, here's an image and here's the source, which is assets/my logo. And now we can go ahead and do a save and build. So I'm going to click save and build. It's going to rebuild my project. And in a moment, you're going to see the page reload. And once the build's completed, here we go. So you notice that this time around, it took me directly to the camera permission prompt. Well, the reason for this is on iOS Safari, it remembers the gyro permission across page reloads, right? So if I were to quit the browser, I'll do that in a moment, and reopen it, it would ask me again. But if I just reload the page here and there, it's already remembered that I have captured the user gesture, that I've granted gyro permissions, and it's only going to ask me to prompt the camera. Now, this might go away pretty quickly, but when I click allow, you're going to see the 8-Wall logo, and it's there, and it was pulsing instead of spinning. So that's where this load image and load animation parameter came into play. So again, if I reload the page here, I didn't actually turn off the splash screen. I've got my custom load screen. It only asked me for camera permissions. But if I quit Safari and open it back up again, it's going to re-ask me for this. Again, this setting is only as sticky as quitting the browser. So again, pre-prompt, motion orientation prompt. I've got my custom logo, my custom colors. I've got the pulsing icon, and we're good to go there. Okay, so maybe now I want to customize that loading prompt that we injected, the one that we displayed before the actual motion and orientation prompt. So that's one that we can also target. We can override the CSS classes. So I have an index.css file here. And just like in the documentation here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to target the prompt box 8W class and the prompt button 8W and also button primary 8W. So I'm going to target these, and we're going to override these with basically some different colors. So we'll do that first, and then we'll take that a step further, and we'll actually change the text that's displayed in that prompt. So let me do a save and build. And again, it's going to reload my page, but if you remember, I'm not going to see it right now because I've already granted permissions. Safari's remembering it. So to really get the effect of this change, I'm going to quit the browser and let's reopen it again. Okay. So there we go. So now I've overridden these three classes, and it changed, the prompt box to green, the text here to green, the prompt button to blue, and the cancel button to blue, and then the primary button, which is the continue button, I've changed that to red. So pretty simple changes here. Okay. But what if I want to take this a step further, and let's also change the labels on the buttons or the text in this particular prompt? We can do that as well. Again, I haven't changed anything else. I can't change the browser prompts here, but nothing I can do about that. So the way that you can change the pre-prompt for motion orientation is actually using JavaScript and a mutation observer. So again, this is something that is part of the engine. And we can do that here. We have some sample code in our documentation as well. But what we're doing here is we're setting up a mutation observer that's watching the DOM. And essentially, it's looking for that class, and it's overriding things. So it's going to change the prompt box 8W, the text inner HTML, and I've put in my new text goes here. Press approve to continue, and we'll change the buttons from like continue and cancel to approve and deny. And once that's changed, it disconnects the observer and it kind of exits out here. So let me save and build this. And once again, a reload isn't going to be sufficient because I already have that setting cached. So let me go ahead and quit the browser, and we'll reopen it up to test out our change. And there we go. So now pretty much everything has been customized. I've got the new text, it's bold. It's got the new colors, the buttons have new text, and I have a customized load screen with custom colors, with a custom icon, and a custom pulse animation instead of the spinning animation. Okay. So, those are some methods to, fairly easily without pulling down any XRExtras code, without, downloading things from GitHub and rebuilding it yourself. Everything we've done here so far is still pulling our XRExtras library from CDN to get all the latest and greatest updates. And we're just, overriding certain things on the fly, but we're still pulling down the library. If you really wanted to get fancy, again, all of the source code for XRExtras is available on our GitHub repo. So if you go to github.com/8thwall/web, there's an XRExtras folder. And if you wanted to build your own XRExtras, you could do it, basically an npm install and an npm run build. It's going to take all the code and output an XRExtras.js file, which then you could serve with your experience. So that's one way. Also, all the source code is here. So specifically, what we've been looking at here today comes from the loading module. So the loading module is the piece that provides the loading screen, and that would be the area of the code that you want to update if you want to build your own custom loading module. So you might go in here, and if you really want to change things, like not just the colors and the icons and the text, but things like maybe you want to redo the layout completely, that might be a good reason to clone this and go in, and you could modify all of the HTML, relay things out. You could override all the CSS and update things. So you have a lot of flexibility in accessing this here. So we're not going to go into the nitty gritty of like how to modify all of this directly here, but definitely take a look at this if you're interested. Also, if you are using Cloud Editor, you will likely want to import the XRExtras code into the Cloud Editor so you can build it along with your project. And we have some good information in the docs about the process of cloning the repo, importing it into your Cloud Editor project, and basically be removing the entry in head.html. Like you would not, in that case, you would not be pulling in XRExtras from our CDN. You would have your own local XRExtras code in your project. So that might be a topic for another live learning session here, but for the sake of time, we're going to move on. And the next thing we're going to talk about, actually, I created a playground project for it since our previous live learning session, but let me show you what we're about to do here live. So I've been getting a number of questions about, well, what if I want to have a splash screen before any of the AR stuff starts, and maybe have like a non-AR page with some information and then like a start AR button, and you want to delay start the AR engine and all of these screens. So we can absolutely do that. So what I'm going to be adding here is kind of what we're going to see is like this. Look at this animated GIF where I have just an image and I have a start AR button, and nothing happens. Nothing gets initialized until I actually click that start AR button. So we're kind of doing like a programmatic delayed start of the AR engine. So let me show you how we do that actually. So I've got an image, this background of a hand holding the phone, which is kind of cool. And what I've done here is I'm adding a div. So again, for the sake of time here, I've got the code commented out, but this is pretty straightforward where I have a div and I actually have like a button, a nested div, which is going to be our button. And then we got some text that's going to say start AR. So in this case, we want to display this screen first before we start AR. So I've got the div here displayed. And now I don't want to start 8th wall automatically. So I'm going to take out the XR web component from the A scene. So this is basically going to say like, don't turn on 8th wall, because the XR web component is what starts the AR engine and starts doing all the tracking. So now I'm going to do a save and build. And this isn't going to work as expected, but that's that's okay. This is kind of step one here. So I'm going to go ahead because we've added this div, but we haven't done anything. Like it doesn't know what to do when we click. All we know is we're going to have a div, and here we go. I've got this loading screen, my own kind of custom screen with a start AR button. But if I click start AR, nothing's happening just yet, right? So let's handle that. Excuse me. So basically, what I want to do here is I want to write a little bit of JavaScript that essentially, has a listener on my button. And when somebody clicks the button, that's when I'm going to be hiding these UI elements. So I want to hide the image, I want to hide the button. And that's also when I want to programmatically add the XR web component to my scene. And that's when it turns on AR, if you will. And that's when I'll start to get the browser prompts. So I have a script in here called Splash-image. And this is just a very basic A-frame component where in the init function, basically, I'm getting a handle. Let me make this a little bit bigger in case it's easier to see like this. So I'm just getting a handle to basically the divs, right? The background image here, we have this one called splash image, and we have this other div called start. And I get a handle to the splash image div, and I get a handle to the start button div. And we create a little function just called add XRWeb. And all this is doing is it's just saying, this.el.scene.el.set attribute. So what this is doing is going to add the XRWeb component to the A scene. And there are no parameters here, but you could do things like if maybe you didn't want SLAM, you could say like disable world tracking. Oops, I have a typo. True, or something like that. But let's just keep it simple for right now. Any of the parameters that you pass to XRWeb, you would put in that second thing there. Okay, and then once they've started, initiated the AR engine, I also want to hide this splash screen or this, custom screen so that it fades away and I get to the AR experience. So I'm just basically adding a hidden class so that it fades away. And then we're setting an on-click listener for our button so that when the start button is clicked, it calls this XRWeb add XRWeb function, which adds the XRWeb component and then hides this image and everything underneath it. So I've defined this basic A-frame component, and now I need to actually register the component. So I'm going to import that code from my Splash-image file. I'm going to register the A-frame component. We're going to call this thing custom splash. So let me copy and paste that. And let's go back into body.html and let's add this custom splash component to our page, our A scene here. So hopefully I don't have any typos here in my code. Always fun with a live session here, but let's go ahead and reload the page here. And it's reloading. I have the custom image. I have my custom start AR button. And now hopefully when I click it, it actually does something. And sure enough, it does. That hid the image. And now I've got the prompts. It's initializing AR. And again, it only is asking this time for the camera because it hasn't been quit yet. So it's still, Safari is remembering my setting. But you know what? Let's just, to be thorough here, let's go ahead and quit the browser. Let's reopen it back up. And I've got my custom intro screen. I've got my custom start AR button. I'm going to click on this. This is adding the XRWeb component to my A scene, turning on the AR engine, which is initiating the camera prompts. And you'll notice though that out of the 3 prompts, which is like the pre-prompt, the motion prompt, and the camera prompt, it is only asking me for the second prompt here. And that's because, again, the AR engine is smart enough where by clicking that start AR button, I have captured a user gesture. So that first prompt about the AR requires access to these sensors, we don't need to inject that anymore. So in this case, you're only going to get the 2 browser prompts. So by having a screen like this, and which is one way to display some custom information before AR starts. Maybe you want to have like a tutorial or like instructions about what's to come. By doing this and getting the user to tap, this eliminates that first of 3 prompts that you see typically. So it's asking me for motion and orientation. It's asking me for camera. And now I have this experience with my own custom intro screen, customized load screen, and we've been able to modify all this pretty easily here. So with that, let's see here. That's all I wanted to demo here today. Let's go ahead and bring up Q&A. So Rigel, why don't we start going through and see what questions we have out there in the audience, and we can go from there.
Cool. Yeah. So we have one here from Andres. Are there any events to take in consideration when loading, after, before loading, or something like that? Loading.
Yeah,
event.
good. Yeah, good question. So there are some events that the engine fires. The loading screen, I'm not aware that it fires an event specifically, but one thing that you can do is if you want to monitor when the loading screen fades away, you could, similar to how I used a mutation observer to see when that prompt appeared in the DOM and override the text, you could do something very similar where it's like you watch to see when the, here, let me pull it up for you here. You could do something like this, but basically watch for, in loading module, you can see when this like loading container div is removed from the DOM, and that could be a trigger to do something in your experience. Now, also, if you are just using things in A-frame components, those components will initialize and take place at certain times in the life cycle. So for example, that there's like if you don't want something to appear too soon before A-frame initializes, you might put that like in the init function of A-frame component. So Rigel, I don't know if you're aware of any other like XRExtras specific loading related events, but that's how I would typically approach this here.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a couple. So
Yeah.
These are, like you said, A-frame specific, but we have one called our engine emits called Reality Ready. This is one that would fire as soon as the load screen disappears, because that's it's really firing the moment that the camera has been opened and we get that first frame back. So we know that
right.
the session has started. So that could be one way. And then I want to say Reality Ready isn't just an A-frame thing because it's through our engine.
Right. That's correct. Yep.
And then of course on the A-frame side, there are events that fire once the scene has loaded, and you can hook into those as well. But yeah, those are the two that come to mind that you hadn't covered.
Okay, great. Good question. Let's see. Another question. Can I customize the QR code screen? Okay, so I think what is being asked here is the almost there workflow, or the almost there screen. So let me go back here and let's bring up the browser. So for example, if I try to open up a SLAM-based experience on my laptop here, this is going to bring up here we go. Still the delayed start. But this is what we call this is coming from the almost there module. So this is another case where all of this source code is available on GitHub. So here, that would be here in the source, but it's in the almost there module. That's basically what's handling these flows, where if you come into a page on a device or browser that isn't compatible, we like for example on desktop, oops, here it is. On desktop, we'll generate a QR code to make it really easy to pull out your phone, scan the QR code, and get to the WebAir experience via the on the right device. So this can all be customized as well. And you could do similar approaches where you could target, CSS classes or IDs to override things on the fly if you don't want to modify the XRExtras code directly.
Yeah, and that almost there component in XRExtras doesn't have too much customization available at the component level. However, I'm just pasting a link so you can see where the code is. But what it does have is a URL parameter. So right there it says visit tony-default-live.dev. That's always going to, by default, just take whatever the URL is that you're currently on the page, and then just sort of generate the QR code at runtime, all that. But if you have a hard-coded short link you want to put in there, or your own, link that you want to take someone somewhere else, you can pass that in via this URL parameter. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, there we go. So I just did that. Again, you can see instead of, obviously this is not a correct URL here, but you can hard code this if you know where the page should be accessed from. So might be something you do for a production build, but probably not want to do for your dev builds. Otherwise, it'll be taking you to the wrong place here. So that was pretty simple. Again, just on the XRExtras almost there, I passed in this URL parameter and I just put in my own custom domain here. So great, good questions. All right. Well, if anybody has additional questions, please feel free to add those into the Q&A, and we can stick around for a few more minutes. And otherwise, we want to thank everybody for their time and interest here today in our live learning session. We definitely look forward to seeing you on our next session. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or issues, please reach out to us, post your questions on Slack, and either myself or Rigel or somebody on the team, or just another developer out there in the community that knows 8th Wall might answer your question. So with that, thanks everybody. Let's bring up the last slide. And again, you can join our Slack channel, 8thwall.com/Slack. You can find us on Twitter at the 8th Wall. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.